I'm sorry, Madison. Your position is no longer needed. That's how Gregory Stone fired me in front of an entire boardroom during a live negotiation worth $3 billion. No warning. No tact. Just a clean slice, like I was nothing more than a broken stapler he decided to toss. The room froze. German voices had been bouncing across the polished oak table seconds earlier, sharp and technical. I had caught every word, every nuance, threading them into English so the deal wouldn't collapse. My headset was still warm when Greg leaned forward, his voice smooth and final. HR will meet you downstairs, he added, as if I were already gone. Silence stretched. Marcus Vogel, Munich's lead negotiator, blinked like he'd misheard. His assistant shifted uncomfortably. Even Samantha Reed, our vice president, avoided my eyes. I'd spent 7 years keeping these deals alive, plugging holes in translations that could have cost us millions. I was the invisible bridge. And now? Disposable. The earpiece slipped in my hand, the rubber sticky against my palm. My pulse hammered, but I forced a thin smile. If Greg wanted me erased in public, then fine, let everyone in that glass cage see exactly how he did it. The rookie he'd planted at the far end of the table fumbled with her mic. Half a sentence came out wrong, clipped and awkward. Marcus frowned, his pen hovering over the contract. The deal teetered. I stood up. Chair legs screeched against the floor, making the silence even heavier. My exit wasn't graceful, but it was loud enough to sting. Greg didn't look at me again. He thought it was over. But I knew better. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of his downfall. The hallway outside the boardroom felt longer than a runway. My heels hit the tile in sharp, even clicks, but the sound didn't cover the weight of the silence behind me. Everyone had seen it. Everyone knew. Assistants by the glass partitions bent over their laptops, pretending to be busy. A guy from accounting nearly collided with me, then looked past me like I was invisible. Not one person met my eyes. That's how offices work. When someone's cut, they vanish. No one risks being next. The elevator button lit up under my finger. I caught my reflection in the chrome doors, pale, tight-lipped, headset still dangling from my hand like a dead limb. 7 years in this company, and my exit looked like I was sneaking out with stolen office supplies. The doors opened, and I stepped inside. For a second, I thought Samantha Reed might follow, at least offer a fake, sorry, it's just business. But no. She stayed behind, glued to Greg's shadow. Loyalty in that building was cheap, and mine had just been thrown in the trash. The elevator hummed down. Each floor number blinked red, a countdown to humiliation. My chest was tight, but my head was clear. I'd been erased in front of billion-dollar partners. That wasn't a misstep. That was a declaration. When the doors slid open to the lobby, HR was already waiting. A woman I'd never seen before held a beige envelope like it was a death certificate. "Miss Clark, if you'll follow me," she said, tone clipped, rehearsed. I didn't take the envelope. Not yet. I walked past her instead, straight toward the glass exit doors. Outside, the city blazed with late afternoon traffic, horns and engines alive and indifferent. In the reflection of the building's mirror-like surface, I saw myself one more time. Jacket sharp, hair perfect, expression carved from stone. Greg thought he'd ended me upstairs. He had no idea he'd just handed me the only weapon I needed, motive. I didn't go home. Not yet. I drove out of the company garage like a fugitive, the beige HR envelope untouched on the passenger seat. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside I was vibrating. Fired. Publicly. During a $3 billion negotiation. It replayed in my head like bad surveillance footage. I pulled into the first open spot I could find, the far corner of a downtown parking structure. The kind of place where no one bothers you. I killed the engine and just sat there. The silence inside the car was brutal. Outside, muffled traffic echoed through concrete, tires squealing, a horn blaring somewhere far off. My phone buzzed twice. A text from Jason Miller, a friend from finance, saw what happened. "I'm sorry. Stay strong." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Stay strong. Easy to type. Harder to do when your career just got executed in front of foreign investors. I leaned back against the seat, replaying Greg's exact words. "Your position is no longer needed." The casual tone, the faint smile, like he was cutting a ribbon at a ceremony. He didn't fire me out of necessity. He did it for effect. A move on his little corporate chessboard. I clenched the headset still in my bag. The same one I'd used to translate a clause that could have saved us from a legal disaster. 7 years of perfecting this job, erased like it was nothing. The parking structure lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering like it was about to burn out. That was how I felt, not broken, just unstable, waiting to either shut down or flare up. For the first time since walking out, I let myself laugh, short, sharp, humorless. They thought I was finished. Greg thought he'd won. But I wasn't the kind of person who stayed down. No, I was the kind who took notes. And I had plenty. Gregory Stone's betrayal wasn't new. It was just the loudest. Sitting in that dim parking garage, I let my mind spool backward through the years. 7 of them. 7 years of promises dangled like carrots, always yanked away at the last second. Year 1, I was the eager recruit. Greg shook my hand at orientation, told me, "Stick with me, Madison. You'll go far." He said it with that politician smile, the kind that made you believe he meant it. Year 3, I was running translations for deals worth hundreds of millions. Greg called me our secret weapon in front of the Germans, then later docked my bonus because budgets were tight. Funny how his new car didn't reflect that. Year 5, Samantha Reed took me aside after a late-night session. She promised, "Your promotion is coming. You've earned it." Instead, they brought in some Ivy League hire with 0 field experience, gave him a corner office, and told me to train him up. And now? Year 7 ended with Greg slicing me out in front of billion-dollar partners like I was just extra baggage. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. They never planned to keep me. I was leverage, a placeholder, someone to do the work until they found a shinier replacement. But there was one thing Greg and Samantha never understood. They thought loyalty made me weak. They thought silence meant I didn't notice. Wrong. I noticed everything. Every careless remark. Every broken promise. Every shortcut they took, assuming someone else would clean it up. Usually, that someone else was me. And I remembered details they didn't even realize mattered: draft agreements, side notes, subtle cultural corrections that kept deals alive. Without me, their empire of polished glass and staged smiles wasn't stable. I wasn't weak. I was loaded with evidence. Greg thought today was his victory lap. He had no idea he'd just activated the one thing I'd been suppressing for years: payback. HR thought they'd clean me out. Badge, parking pass, office key. They ticked the boxes, smiled politely, and pushed me out the door. But HR runs on scripts, and scripts always miss something. What they missed was sitting on my kitchen floor the next morning, my old company laptop, black casing chipped at the edges, the same one I'd carried to hundreds of meetings. No one asked for it. No receipts, no signature log. Just another oversight in a building full of them. I booted it up. The fan wheezed, screen flickered, and then the login screen. My credentials still worked. 7 years with Stone and Reed, and they couldn't be bothered to disable an account before firing me. The desktop was a minefield. Folders, subfolders, hidden drafts. I opened one labeled Contracts, Archive. Inside, hundreds of files. Legal drafts, annotated translations, cross-references. My notes were everywhere, buried in comment bubbles, word track changes, red-flagged clauses. And those notes weren't fluff. They were the kind of details that saved deals. Cultural corrections. Alternative phrases that kept contracts legally binding across borders. Without them, most of those deals wouldn't even exist. Greg Stone thought I was disposable. But in truth, every billion-dollar handshake he bragged about had my fingerprints under it. I scrolled deeper. There it was, the working draft from the current $3 billion negotiation with Vogel Industries. The rookie Greg threw into the fire wouldn't know half of these terms. The Germans were meticulous. One mistranslation, and they'd walk. My phone buzzed. A text from Jason Miller, the only colleague with enough backbone to reach out. They're already celebrating in the executive lounge. Greg's playing hero. Hero. The word made my jaw tighten. Greg was parading around as if he'd closed the deal, while his foundation was already cracking. Vogel's team didn't even realize yet that the key material wasn't in their hands. It was here, glowing on my screen, in files Greg didn't even know existed. I copied the folder to a private drive. If they locked me out tomorrow, I'd still have it. Insurance. Proof. Ammunition. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the messy desktop icons. For 7 years, I'd been the cleaner. The fixer. The one who made sure mistakes didn't blow up. And how did they think me? by cutting me in front of international partners like I was dead weight. Fine. They wanted me gone? They'd get their wish. They'd also get something else, a collapse they couldn't contain. I checked the clock. 2:17 a.m. My eyes burned, but my mind was wide awake. The files on this laptop weren't just leftovers. They were leverage. Greg had made a show of firing me in public, but he'd left the door wide open. And I had just stepped through it. I didn't sleep. By sunrise, my apartment looked like a war room. Coffee mugs lined the counter, blinds shut tight, the laptop casting its sickly glow across the table. The folder I'd pulled last night wasn't just full of notes. It was full of flaws. Draft after draft showed how sloppy Stone and Reed had gotten. Clauses half-translated, context missing, placeholders never updated. Alone, any one of them was survivable. Together, they were a time bomb. That was when the idea hit me. Not revenge in the movies with smashed glass or angry phone calls. Real revenge. Paperwork, deadlines, compliance. The kind of revenge that didn't need me to scream, it just needed me to follow the rules better than they did. I knew Vogel's team. Marcus Vogel himself was sharp, but he trusted documents more than people. If something didn't match, if a clause contradicted another, he'd stall the whole deal until it was clean. That was his weakness. And I had exactly the files to trigger it. I needed information. Fresh, current, unfiltered. So I packed the laptop, grabbed a jacket, and headed to the one place no one from Stone and Reed would ever bother to check, the public library. By mid-morning, I was sitting at a dusty table surrounded by college kids and retirees. Everyone buried in their own screens. Nobody cared about the woman in the corner with the black laptop and a folder full of billion-dollar secrets. I logged into public business databases, cross-checking contract terms with EU legal standards. It didn't take long to find it, a translation gap on a liability clause. In English, it read like a harmless condition. In German, it implied full financial responsibility if the deal went south. The rookie would never catch it. Vogel's lawyers definitely would. I took notes. Dates, clauses, version numbers. Piece by piece, the foundation of Stone's big victory started to look like a fraud. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Jason. It was an unknown number. The message was short. We know you still have access. Don't do anything you'll regret. I stared at it, pulse steady. So, they'd noticed the missing laptop after all. Good. That meant they were worried. I typed one line into my notes, underlined it twice. Leverage isn't power. Timing is. I didn't just have files. I had the fuse. All I had to do now was decide when to light it. Information is ammunition. And I needed more than just my old notes if I wanted to bring Stone and Reed down. The library was a good start, but files alone weren't enough. Deals this big lived and died on context, who said what, who signed what, and what they ignored. That meant people. And I still had a few left. I called Jason Miller first. Finance analyst. One of the few who hadn't treated me like furniture. He picked up on the second ring, voice hushed like he was hiding in a supply closet. Jesus, Maddie, are you okay? I'm fine, I said flatly. Better than they are. He laughed nervously. You should see it here. Greg strutting around like he cured cancer. Samantha's already talking about press releases. They celebrating? Oh yeah, drinks on the executive floor last night. But Marcus's lawyers are asking questions this morning. They smell something off. That was exactly what I needed to hear. I pressed harder. Jason, I need numbers. Payment schedules, draft revisions. Anything that crossed your desk before they cut me out. He hesitated. You know if they trace. They won't, I snapped. Just send what you can. Off the record. A long pause. Then, check your inbox in an hour. Next, I texted Olivia Turner. Former IT at Stone and Reed. Smart, cynical, the kind of woman who could hack a printer just to spite a manager. She left last year after Reed froze her out of a promotion. Got a job for you. Need quiet access. Interested? The typing bubbles flashed, then disappeared. A minute later her reply came. If it's about Greg, I'm in. Send details. Perfect. By the afternoon, Jason had slipped me spreadsheets that made my blood run cold. Payment obligations written in euros and dollars didn't match. Someone had lazily swapped conversion rates between drafts. A minor error worth hundreds of millions. Combine that with the liability clause I'd flagged yesterday, and the deal wasn't just shaky. It was radioactive. I sat back in my chair, phone buzzing again. Jason, careful. Word is Greg's paranoid. He thinks someone's leaking. Good. Let him sweat. Paranoia meant mistakes. Olivia texted right after, got into their shared drives. Nothing wiped. You want me to pull everything tied to Vogel? Yes, I typed. Everything. By midnight, my drive was filling with contracts, emails, calendar invites. I read through each one, line by line. And the picture came together. Stone and Reed were about to walk Marcus Vogel into a disaster disguised as a partnership. They thought they'd cut me out. But all they'd done was give me a clear view from the outside. And from here, I could see every weakness. By the end of the week, the media was already singing Gregory Stone's praises. Stone and Reed secures landmark €3 billion deal, one headline read. A glossy photo showed Greg shaking hands with Marcus Vogel, all smiles and champagne glasses. Samantha Reed stood beside them, her smile stretched thin but polished. I almost laughed. The contract wasn't signed. Not officially. At best, they had a memorandum of understanding, a glorified promise. But Greg had never cared about details. Headlines fed his ego more than ink on paper. Inside those articles, though, I spotted something useful. Quotes from Vogel's team. Phrases about final reviews, pending revisions, further clarification. Those weren't the words of people locked into a binding contract. Those were the words of cautious lawyers circling a pit. Jason confirmed it in our next call. They're panicking, Maddie. Vogel's side keeps sending back marked-up drafts. Samantha's trying to keep Greg calm, but it's bad. Half the corrections are things you flagged months ago. I smirked. And without me? They're drowning. Good. Meanwhile, Olivia delivered her first payload. A folder full of internal emails, calendar entries, and revision notes. One chain stood out, Samantha Reed pushing to skip compliance reviews to expedite the deal. Translation. Cut corners, hope nobody notices. I highlighted the dates, copied the thread, and filed it away. Ammunition. But Greg wasn't stupid. Arrogant, yes. Reckless, absolutely. Stupid? Never. And that made him dangerous. Word was he'd been demanding daily updates, pacing the executive floor like a general waiting for a battle report. Jason told me, he's convinced someone's leaking. He thinks it's one of Vogel's aides. HR sniffing around, checking badge logs. Not me. Not yet. The pressure was cracking the building from the inside. Assistants whispering in elevators. Lawyers quietly polishing resumes. IT scrambling to patch holes too big to hide. And me? I sat in my apartment with a front row seat, watching the empire shake. They thought they'd erased me. Instead, they'd given me the perfect cover, the ghost in their system, the silence they couldn't trace. Greg was sweating, Vogel was stalling, Samantha was spinning. And the best part? The real damage hadn't even started yet. The deal looked stable on the outside, but inside it was already splintering. I just needed the right hit to crack it open. That hit came through Daniel Hayes. Daniel wasn't glamorous. Middle-aged, blunt, the kind of lawyer who drank burnt coffee out of paper cups and billed you for the time it took to sip it. But he was reliable. I'd met him years back when Stone and Reed tried to underpay a group of contractors. Daniel buried them in labor code until they coughed up every cent. I called him on a Tuesday morning. I need leverage, I said. Quiet, airtight, and legal. He didn't even ask why. Send me what you've got. I dropped a packet on his desk that afternoon. My translations, Jason's spreadsheets, Olivia's emails. He skimmed in silence, pen tapping against the edge of the folder. Finally, he looked up. Jesus, Maddie. This isn't leverage. This is a live grenade. Can it stop the deal? If I file it right? Yeah. At minimum, it'll stall Vogel's team for months. At worst, it'll make them walk. File it. That night, Daniel drafted a formal inquiry to the European Trade Compliance Board. Not an accusation, a request for clarification. But the effect was the same. The board froze progress until Stone and Reed proved their translations matched both legal systems. By Wednesday morning, Vogel's lawyers had the letter. By noon, the panic hit the tower. Jason called me from a stairwell, voice low. You did something, didn't you? Why? Because Samantha looks like she's about to collapse and Greg's tearing into everyone. Vogel's team won't move until compliance clears the contract. And nobody knows how to fix it. I smiled into the phone. Guess they should have kept their translator. Jason didn't laugh. He whispered, Greg's dangerous when he feels cornered. Be careful. I hung up, staring at the ceiling. Dangerous or not, Greg wasn't in control anymore. I was. The trigger had been pulled. Now I just had to watch the explosion spread. By 9 a.m., the executive floor was a pressure cooker. Doors slammed. Voices cut through the glass. Assistants moved like they were dodging gunfire. The compliance letter had landed, and the tower felt it. Gregory Stone planted himself in the center conference room and started assigning blame. Why wasn't this flagged? His palm hit the table. Who approved these drafts? Nobody answered. People studied their laptops like they were life rafts. Samantha Reed tried to project control. We'll respond by end of day. Legal will align translations. Finance will confirm currency terms. Comms will manage optics. She said it fast, like speed could replace substance. A junior lawyer nodded so hard he looked dizzy. Jason Miller texted me from a stairwell. He's melting down. Vogel's team paused everything. Greg wants names. I typed back, keep your head down. Inside the room, Greg called Marcus Vogel on speaker. The line clicked, then Marcus's voice came through, calm and cold. We received the board's notice. Until compliance confirms equivalence, there is nothing to sign. Greg forced a laugh. It's procedural. It is not procedural, Marcus said. It is fundamental. Your English text places caps. The German version does not. Which is your position? Silence. Samantha jumped in. We're reconciling now. Then we wait, Marcus replied, and ended the call. Greg stared at the dead speakerphone like it had insulted him. Find me the translator who handled these sections, he snapped. Where's the history on section 12:4? A legal analyst cleared his throat. Those revisions came from Madison Clark's working notes. My name landed like a dropped weight. Heads turned. Samantha's jaw tightened. Get them, Greg said. We don't have them, the analyst replied. Her annotated versions weren't uploaded to the final repository. We only have clean drafts. Greg's face went flat then red. So you're telling me our €3 billion deal is stalled because we can't answer a basic clause question without a fired translator? No one spoke. He turned to Samantha. Fix it. She straightened, stiff and brittle. We'll reconstruct from emails. They tried. For hours, the floor spun on itself. Paralegals dug through threads. Analysts compared columns. IT pulled backups. The more they looked, the worse it got. Dates didn't match. Currency conversions swung wildly between drafts. A payment schedule in euros had been pasted into a dollar sheet and never corrected. Jason called at lunch, voice low. We found 3 different totals in 3 versions of the same term sheet. Greg just tore into finance in front of everyone. What about Reed? She's working the PR angle. Routine review, minor alignment, that kind of thing. But the Germans aren't buying it. Their counsel asked for original translation history, who made each change and why. I let that sink in. Without my notes, they couldn't answer the why. And without the why, compliance wouldn't move. By afternoon, Greg had security in the mix. Badge logs. Meeting room access. Who touched which files when? HR hovered, trying to look helpful, looking terrified instead. Someone whispered leak in the hallway and then pretended they hadn't. Samantha stalked into IT. I need the previous repository threads. Olivia pinged me a minute later. They're digging blind. Nothing was wiped, but half their links are dead. They changed folder names last month and never updated. Amateur hour. Greg regrouped the execs at 4. He'd swapped charm for threat. We are not losing this. I want a clean reconciliation deck on my desk by 7. If we don't give Vogel a clear, consistent position tonight, I will start replacing people tomorrow. The room scattered. Screens lit up. Printers screamed. Somewhere, a temp started crying silently. Marcus sent one more email before close of business, a tidy list of specific inconsistencies, and a request for certified translations. He copied his general counsel and the board contact. It wasn't a bomb. It was a clock. Samantha drafted a reply that said nothing and sent it anyway. Greg paced, phone pressed to his ear, calling anyone who might tell him this was fine. No one did. Jason drifted back to the stairwell and called me again. I don't know how long they can fake it. People are talking exit strategies. Let them, I said. When the ship tilts, the smart ones move first. Madison, you planned this? I lit the fuse, I said. They stacked the dynamite. He exhaled. Greg asked for your number. You gave it to him? I said I didn't have it. A beat. But he'll find it. Good, I said. Let him call. At 6:58, the reconciliation deck slid onto Greg's desk. 80 slides, pretty colors, nothing resolved. He skimmed, then hurled it back at Samantha. "This is noise." "No," she said, voice thin. "This is the mess you made when you cut the person who kept it clean." He stared at her, stunned that anyone in his orbit would say the quiet part out loud. Then he looked at the glass wall, at the reflections of a tired staff, at the headlines still open on giant monitors, at a calendar slot labeled signing, tentative, no one dared delete. "Find Madison Clark," he said finally, each word bitten off. "Tonight." Downstairs, the lobby lights brightened for the evening rush. Guests filed out. Security checked the empty badge lanes. In the garage, engines turned over. The building exhaled. Upstairs, panic kept breathing. Gregory Stone wanted me found. That much was clear. But wanting and having were two different things. By the time his order spread through the building, I was already 3 steps ahead. Jason had warned me. Olivia had confirmed IT was chasing shadows. They could look all they wanted, what I had wasn't in their servers anymore. It was in my hands. I didn't move recklessly. No celebratory drinks. No reckless messages. My phone stayed clean. My laptop stayed offline. Every note, every draft I had pulled was backed up twice, one encrypted drive in my apartment, one hidden with someone who owed me a favor. Insurance. Meanwhile, the cracks widened. Vogel's lawyers weren't content with vague promises. They sent formal requests for certified translation histories. They wanted metadata. They wanted explanations for discrepancies in Section 12. 4. Section 14. 2. Section 19. 1. Each email was a scalpel slicing deeper into Stone and Reed's bluff. Jason called again, whispering into static. "It's chaos, Maddie. Half the floor is camped out in conference rooms, trying to rebuild your work from scraps. Greg hasn't slept. Samantha's losing her voice from spinning answers. And Vogel just rejected another draft outright. What reason?" I asked. "Currency mismatch. Payment timelines." He told Greg, and I quote, "This looks careless." Greg almost put his fist through the glass. Good. But leverage only mattered if it was applied at the right time. If I moved too soon, they'd scramble a fix, spin it in the press, bury me under PR noise. If I waited, the Germans would do my work for me, step by step, question by question, until the deal collapsed under its own weight. Patience was power. I spent those nights in silence, combing through every file, making sure I understood the full picture. It wasn't just mistranslations. It was negligence. Stone and Reed had ignored compliance checks, skipped legal reviews, signed off on drafts they didn't understand. My annotations were the only thing standing between them and disaster. Without me, their empire looked polished on the outside, but hollow inside. The funny thing? They still hadn't figured it out. Greg thought I was a missing tool, something he could retrieve and slot back in. Samantha thought I was a liability, someone to keep quiet. Neither of them understood that the silence itself was leverage. Every unanswered question from Vogel made me stronger. Every panicked meeting gave me more control. Jason's last call that week ended with a whisper I'd been waiting for. "Greg wants to reach you. He's saying it's time to bring you back." I didn't answer right away. I let the words hang, let the silence stretch. Finally, I said, "Good. Let him sweat a little longer." And I hung up. Because in this game, the one who breaks the silence first always loses. Vogel's team made the next move. On Monday morning, they issued a formal request. All translation drafts, including annotated versions and revision logs, delivered within 72 hours. It wasn't framed as optional. It was a demand wrapped in polite corporate language. And it was copied to the European Trade Compliance Board. Jason called me from his car. "They're screwed, Maddie. Nobody can find the annotated drafts. Legal swears they don't exist. Greg's losing his voice screaming at people. He even accused Samantha of covering for you." I almost smiled. "She'll love that." "She didn't," he said. "She stormed out of his office and hasn't come back." I pictured the scene, glass walls, staff pretending not to hear, Samantha's heels snapping down the hall. The empire was eating itself. Meanwhile, Olivia funneled me more files. "They've tried 3 different reconciliations," she said over the phone. "Numbers don't match. Every time they fix one column, another breaks. It's like a leaking pipe." I flipped through the documents she sent. Payment milestones overlapping, liability clauses contradicting each other. Any auditor would laugh them out of the room. The 72-hour clock ticked louder with every passing minute. Vogel wasn't bluffing. If they failed to produce the files, compliance would escalate. That meant hearings, delays, penalties. Investors would run. Greg tried charm first. At a press conference, he called it a routine alignment process and promised full transparency. The press ate it up for a day. Then Vogel's general counsel issued a statement. We await Stone and Reed's supporting documentation to ensure accuracy. Translation: prove it or fold. Jason texted, he wants you, Maddie. He's telling people you're the only one who can untangle this. Of course he was. Greg finally understood what I'd known from day one. Without me, he had nothing. But I wasn't rushing back. Timing mattered. They had 72 hours, and I planned to let 68 of them burn before picking up the phone. When I finally answered Greg's message, a terse email forwarded through Jason, I kept it short. Greg, you cut me loose in front of international partners. You said my position wasn't needed. If you want my help now, it won't come cheap. I hit send and closed the laptop. For the first time, the screw had turned the other way. And Greg Stone was the one pinned under it. Greg Stone didn't call me directly. His ego wouldn't allow it. Instead, the message came through Jason. Greg wants to meet. Tonight. Discreet. Executive Lounge, 9 p.m. I read it twice, then laughed out loud. The same lounge where they'd toasted my replacement? Perfect. At 8:45, I walked into the building I'd once called mine. Security eyed me, but Jason had already smoothed it over. A guest badge slid across the counter. My picture wasn't on it. Just the word visitor. That stung, but it also reminded me how far Greg had fallen if he needed me back inside. The lounge sat on the top floor, dim lighting, leather chairs, overpriced whiskey bottles lined up like trophies. Greg was there already, pacing by the window, city lights stretching behind him. Samantha Reed sat on the couch, phone in her hand, expression tight. He turned when I entered. Madison. His voice was calm, too calm, the tone of a man pretending he wasn't cornered. I set my bag down, didn't sit. Greg. Samantha stood, as if she might soften the edges. We need your help. I raised an eyebrow. Funny. Last time we spoke, I was told I wasn't needed. Greg's jaw clenched. That was a mistake. No, I said. That was a choice. And now you're paying for it. For a moment, silence filled the room. Jason shifted uncomfortably by the door. Samantha glanced at Greg, waiting for him to swallow his pride. He didn't. Name your price, he said finally. There it was. The words I'd been waiting 7 years to hear. I didn't rush. I walked to the bar, poured myself a glass of water, and took a slow sip. Let him stew. Then I turned. My annotated drafts, my translations, my corrections, those are mine. You want them? Fine. But it's going to cost you. Not just money. Terms. Greg folded his arms. Terms? You'll sign a binding consulting agreement. My fee, $1 million upfront. Plus 5% of the Vogel contract value if it closes. And I held up a finger when he started to protest, my name on the final documentation as lead translator. Not buried, not erased. Samantha sucked in a sharp breath. Jason stared at the floor. Greg's face reddened. You're insane. No, I said evenly. I'm the only reason this deal is still breathing. Without me, you've got 72 hours before Vogel walks. Less now. Silence again. The kind that eats through walls. Finally, Samantha spoke. Greg, she's right. We don't have a choice. He turned to her, fury in his eyes, but he didn't argue. Not out loud. I picked up my bag. You have until noon tomorrow to decide. Otherwise, the Germans get to enjoy watching you crash without me. And then I walked out, leaving Greg Stone choking on his pride. Greg Stone caved. I knew he would. By noon the next day, an envelope arrived at my apartment. A formal consulting agreement, exactly as I'd demanded. $1 million upfront, 5% of the Vogel contract if it closed, and my name listed as lead translator. No edits, no delays. A wire confirmation followed within the hour. Money wasn't the point, though I won't lie. Seeing 7 figures hit my account felt satisfying. What mattered was the shift. Greg had dragged me out of a boardroom like trash. Now he was paying me to walk back in through the front door. And that's exactly what I did. At 3 p.m., I entered the same glass conference room where I'd been fired. The air was different now, heavy, nervous, desperate. Greg sat at the head of the table, face pale, tie loose. Samantha Reed perched beside him, lips pressed tight. Across from them, Marcus Vogel and his legal team looked unimpressed, pens lined up like weapons. I didn't wait for an introduction. I placed a thick binder on the table and said, "Gentlemen, these are the corrected annotated drafts. Every discrepancy between your German and English versions is reconciled here. Each correction is documented with source notes and legal references. If you follow these, compliance clears the deal." The Germans leaned forward immediately, scanning. One of their lawyers nodded, flipping pages fast. Vogel himself gave me a long, calculating look. "You were not at the last sessions," he said. "No," I replied. "Because your partners decided they didn't need me. They were wrong." The room went silent. Greg shifted, trying to reclaim ground. "With Madison back on board, we're confident." I cut him off. "With me, this deal works. Without me, it collapses. That's the truth." Samantha shot me a warning glance, but Vogel raised his hand. "I prefer honesty." "Continue." So I did. I walked them through Section 12.4, showing how Greg's team had misrepresented liability. I explained the currency mismatches Jason had flagged. I revealed the timeline errors Olivia had uncovered. Each point tightened the noose. Vogel's lawyers murmured among themselves. One finally said, if this had not been corrected, we would have withdrawn. Greg flushed, but stayed silent. Vogel looked straight at me. "And you're certain these corrections are accurate?" "Yes," I said. "Every one of them." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Then this deal survives because of you, not because of Stone and Reed." The words hit the room like a gavel. Samantha's eyes darted to Greg. His face was stone, but the tremor in his jaw betrayed him. For the first time, the balance had flipped. I wasn't the discarded translator anymore. I was the center of gravity. And Greg Stone knew it. For 48 hours, the illusion held. Greg Stone strutted through the office, pretending the storm had passed, clinging to the idea that my corrections meant salvation. Samantha Reed followed close behind, parroting sound bites about stability and alignment. But the Germans weren't fooled. Marcus Vogel's lawyers tore through every draft I'd handed them. They weren't just checking my corrections, they were checking everything. And the deeper they went, the more rot they uncovered. Contracts signed years earlier. Misstated obligations. Entire sections missing supporting documentation. By Thursday, the questions landed like bullets. Who authorized this translation? Why does this schedule conflict with the payment clause? Where is the compliance review certificate? Greg had no answers. Samantha tried to spin, but Vogel's team didn't want spin. They wanted proof. And proof was exactly what Stone and Reed didn't have. Jason called me after midnight, his voice raw. "They're falling apart, Maddie." Vogel's counsel sent a 12-page memo outlining potential breaches. "Investors are calling nonstop. Half the analysts are packing their desks." "Greg?" I asked. "He's unraveling. He screamed at an intern today for bringing the wrong coffee. Security had to step in." Good. Friday morning, the hammer dropped. Vogel Industries announced a suspension of negotiations, citing concerns regarding accuracy and compliance. Translation: the deal was dead. 3 billion euros evaporated in a single press release. I watched it unfold on my laptop, news anchors scrambling for commentary, market tickers bleeding red. Stone and Reed stock fell 12% before lunch. By the end of the day, it was down 20%. Greg called me once. Just once. The voicemail was short, broken, almost human. "Madison, we can fix this. Call me back." I didn't. Instead, I walked past the building that night. The executive floor glowed with frantic light, silhouettes pacing, gesturing, collapsing into chairs. The empire was crumbling in real time. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. I'd already done enough. By Monday, Vogel had announced a new partnership with Stone and Reed's biggest competitor. The same competitor who'd been circling for months, waiting for Greg to choke. They scooped up the deal at a discount, smiling for cameras while Greg's face disappeared from the press entirely. 3 billion euros. Gone. And with it, Gregory Stone's career. The collapse wasn't loud. It was surgical. On Monday, Stone and Reed held an emergency board meeting. By Tuesday, Gregory Stone was gone. No farewell email, no speech. Just a memo, effective immediately. Gregory Stone has resigned from his position as Chief Executive Officer. Everyone knew resigned meant removed. Samantha Reed lasted 48 hours longer. She tried to salvage her reputation, spinning the failure as Greg's arrogance. But the emails Olivia had pulled her emails were already circulating among directors and regulators. By Thursday, she vanished too. Officially, pursuing new opportunities. Unofficially, blacklisted. Jason kept me updated from the inside. "It's a ghost town," he whispered over the phone. "Half the analysts are gone. Whole departments waiting for pink slips. Nobody talks above a whisper. They're scared the next shoe will drop." And it did. Investors pulled out. Clients reconsidered contracts. Stone and Reed, once the darling of international finance, was bleeding in real time. The €3 billion failure had branded them toxic. Meanwhile, the world outside moved fast. Headlines shifted. Stone and Reed deal implodes. Competitor secures Vogel partnership. Analysts debated how much longer the firm could survive. I watched it all from a distance. No gloating. No champagne. Just quiet satisfaction. They'd erase me in front of billion-dollar partners. And in doing so, they'd erase themselves. But the story wasn't just their downfall. It was my reset. Daniel Hayes, my lawyer, called one evening. "You know the competitor that picked up Vogel?" "Yes. They want you." Lead negotiator. Full control of language services. Salaries generous, but the real kicker is equity. They want you in the room when the next deals are built. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence hang, the same silence that had once crushed me in a boardroom. Now it was mine to use. Finally, I said, "Send me the contract." After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a while. 7 years I'd been invisible. 7 years cleaning up after arrogant executives, patching holes they didn't even know existed. And it all turned because one man thought humiliating me would make him stronger. He was wrong. Looking back, the lesson wasn't about money or titles or even revenge. It was about underestimation. Gregory Stone believed he could humiliate me in public and walk away stronger. Samantha Reed believed I was replaceable, just another cog in her polished machine. They both believed silence meant weakness. But silence can be strategy. And underestimation can be the sharpest weapon in the room. I realized something important. Power isn't just what you hold in your hands. It's what the other side doesn't see until it's too late. That day in the boardroom, Greg thought he'd ended my career. In reality, he handed me every piece I needed to end his. So here's my question for you. How many times have you been underestimated, and how close are you to turning it into your advantage? Because if there's one thing this story proves, it's that revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And when the whisper finally breaks the silence, it's already too late for the people who ignored it. Every story lives as long as it is remembered. A like is your mark on the story, and a subscription is your ticket to the next one.